Hi everyone, Paul here with Habitat IQ. Today we're going to do a deep dive into some of the key features within the web platform of Habitat IQ. Those include your simulations feature, your property plan feature, and the camera integrations with our Reveal trail cameras. So excited to dive into them, and let's get started. So after you create your profile and purchase your property, it's going to take you to your My Property, or what I call the baseline view. As you can see here, in this view, I've already spent some time mapping out some of the key things on my property. But this baseline view is really to map out the current state of your property today. That includes your food sources, your water sources, your specific access routes and structures around your property. And the goal here is really to complete exactly the way that your property will look from a mapping perspective. So the more thorough you are in completing your baseline property, the more intuitive the system's going to be, and the better foundation you're going to be building off of. To add new map elements and complete the build out of your baseline property, you're going to click the Add Something New button. This is a key functionality within the app, and when you click that, you're going to have a total of 6 different categories that you can choose from. You have your food sources, you have your water, you have all of the human pressure sources that you'll have across the property. This is going to be like your roads, your structures, even like your parking lots if you have any, or campgrounds. You also have habitat and cover. So this is where you're going to get into the timber, you're going to get into the pastures, you're going to identify where the screening is, if you have any screening set up on your property, where that would be. And then you also, of course, are going to have the ability to add your hunting locations. You can mark across your property where your stands are, where the blinds are, or where your box blinds are. You can specifically name them, and after naming them, you'll show the access path or determine the access path across the property. In this example, I'll start by adding a food plot. So under food, you're going to click food plot, and then I'll zoom in here and I'll draw the boundaries for that food plot. So in this example, I'm going to create a plot here in the back side of this cornfield. Go ahead and draw that out. And then when I click Finish Area, I'll be able to name it. I'll select my crop types. This one I'm going to do clover, and I'll do some ryegrass. I'll choose the hours of sunlight. This one gets plenty of sun. And I'll go ahead and save that. And you'll notice after saving it, now that mapping element shows up on my baseline map as a food plot that has clover and ryegrass. To edit it, I can just click on it and it'll take me right back into that modal to be able to edit the details or the crop types around that food plot. Additionally, I have a tree stand to add in that I didn't mark on this property. So again, add something new, hunting location, and this one's actually a box blind, so I'll go ahead and choose that. And that box blind sits right over here in this corner of that food plot. Go ahead and drop it there. And now I'm going to draw how I access that. And this is a really important part of the app. A lot of people don't think about how their access impacts deer movement and where deer are likely to be on your property. So by drawing the access path for every one of your stands, you're going to tell the system specifically how your pressure is potentially impacting the property. So go ahead and draw that path and hit finish. And now you can see In this example, I have 3 stands now in this field. Some might say that's too many. I have my road that I'm going to use to access it. I usually park down here at the bottom, and then I'll walk up, and depending on which one of these 3 stands I'm going to, I'll use any of those 3 access paths. So now that I've added a few more elements to my property, I have this button down here that I can use to recalculate my score. When I click this button, what the system's doing is it's reading the changes that I've made, and it's analyzing those changes and determining how that's either positively or negatively impacted my score. As you can see on this property, I have a baseline rating of 20, which isn't a very high score. When you click into the score, this is going to take you to a drilled down version of the different scores within Habitat IQ. My overall score is calculated by combining all of my baseline scores, and ultimately you kind of think about this like your credit score. The more you do on the property and the better you manage your property, the higher this overall score is going to go over time. You can see that based on the changes that I've made to the property, my score is improved by 79 points. You also have your habitat score, and this is really a measure of the quality and the balance of the habitat zones across the property, with a greater emphasis on those areas that'll support the mature bucks. And then we have our confidence score. The confidence score is calculated by essentially how much you've added to your baseline map. And the goal here is to ensure that we have a high confidence in the scores that we're giving you by showing you that we have a high confidence score. If you notice this confidence score down in the 20s or 30s or even 50, that's basically saying that you haven't mapped out enough things on your property for us to have a high level of confidence in the scoring and the visualizations that we're giving you. When we zoom in and take a look at the layers within Habitat IQ, there are 3 core layers. You have your satellite view, which is the view that I primarily use. You have your topo view, which is going to be specifically for those elevation changes. And then you have your hybrid view, which is going to be a condensed view of both satellite and the topo together. And what I really like about this is that all 3 of these layers have the 3D functionality. So I'm in the hybrid layer now, which is a mix of satellite and the topo. And if I click 3D, it now takes me to the 3D interactive map that is in that hybrid layer. Go ahead and close that out. By zooming in, you can now see specifically those topo layers and those elevation changes, as well as that satellite view, all in one map that's in 3D. Out of all of my views and layers within Habitat IQ, this one here is by far my favorite because it allows me to understand in 3D how topo actually starts to read out on a map, so you're not just looking at it in 2D. So if you zoom in here, you'll see this is a pretty steep valley right here. And you can see that valley runs all the way up through the bottom of that timber. And again, if you zoom out, you'll see there's a good top here. It's full of ag fields and food plots. But definitely one of my favorite views. And you can find that under the layer section. Again, we're in the hybrid mode and we have that 3D view turned on. You can lock the north up, which means it's going to keep the map oriented with north positioned at the top of your view. You can show your habitat zones by turning that toggle on and off. So turning it on will display the habitat zones across your property. You can toggle your custom pins on and off. So that's going to be those green pins that you see here. If you'd like a view where you can remove those at times, you can just simply use that toggle and it'll drop those pins out of view. And then there's 2 toggles that pull in your reveal camera functionality. You have a toggle to actually show or hide your cameras. You'll notice if I toggle that on, you'll find camera shows up here in that corner of that food plot, and a camera shows up there. Again, toggling it off, they disappear. Along with that, I can add the camera battery status, and this is really just an additional layer that users may be able to see the specific status of their batteries for every camera across their property. So if I toggle this on, you'll see that each one of my cameras have 100% battery, and that little indicator that comes right over top of the camera itself. So this camera battery status I find is a really important toggle within the map layer. And then additionally, you can turn on your property boundaries. By toggling this on, it'll show you the specific boundaries associated with each parcel on the property. And then it gives you some additional functionality to turn on and off the property owner labels. And then if you want to actually interact with that property, meaning interact with it through a click functionality, you can turn that toggle on and off as well. So a lot of different toggles in here to give you a very customized view of your map, but specifically wanted to call out habitat zones, the 3D mapping where you can move from 2D to 3D, and then the 2 camera integrations, which is the ability to show and hide the cameras, and the ability to turn the battery percentage on and off for your cameras across your property. And then in the legend section, this is where you're going to find what those specific habitat zones mean. So you have your mature buck bedding zone, your young buck bedding zone, and your doe bedding zone. And in order to see those zones, you're going to come back over to your layer section. You're going to turn that toggle on. And if you can see, that map just lit up with color. These are your habitat zones. The habitat zones are made to give you a visual indication of specifically where deer may be interacting on the property. As you can see in this example, the dark green, so this area here, as well as this area here, those are likely areas where mature bucks are going to be bedding and using frequently. The yellow areas are going to be where the young bucks are likely to be using your property and potentially bedding. And then the orange zones are going to be where does are likely to be bedding and using your property. And this is a really key functionality of your baseline property view, is these habitat zones to help you better predict specifically where deer may be. And no matter if you're looking for does, young bucks, or mature bucks, this will give you a visual representation of where those may be on your property. And this is a dynamic model, right? So as you add elements or as you take elements away, you're going to be recalculating your score, which will ultimately then change the visualization of where we think that deer are likely to be using your property. The next feature we'll look at in the app is our simulations feature. And simulations is really about exploring the possibilities of your property and what it can become. And that can be short term for this upcoming fall, or it could be 1, 2, 3 years out. But the goal with simulations was to provide our users with a sandbox to explore the possibilities of a property. And all of this is very hypothetical, and it's a model built on how your habitat score and your habitat zones either improve or decrease based on the changes that you're proposing you make on the property. So when I click into simulations, you'll see here that I have 3 different simulations I've created. One of those simulations, the middle one, which is my spring and summer deer chores, that's already been promoted to my property plan. That means that I liked exactly what I was getting out of that simulation. I liked the plan that I put in place, and I was happy with where those outcomes would leave the property. So I took that simulation and I turned it into the property plan, which is the next feature that we'll dive into. But when looking at simulations, let's say I wanted to start a new simulation. So I click into the new simulation, and in this view, what you're seeing is the black and white is the ghost mode of how your property currently looks, and everything that's in color are the changes that I've made to this property within this specific simulation, right? So this is like what I'm exploring that I would potentially do on the property. To add something new to a simulation, you click the Add Something New button, and again, choose from your categories. In this example, I have an additional food plot that I want to add in. So I'm going to choose food plot. And then I'm going to mark out the boundaries of that food plot. I'm going to take part of this cornfield here, and I'm going to turn it into clover field. So go ahead and finish that area. I'll select my crop type, which will be clover for this one. I'll then choose the hours of sunlight. And luckily on this particular plot, I get plenty of sunlight. And then I'll go ahead and save those details. And what I'm doing here in this simulation is I'm, again, exploring the possibilities across this property. You can see I added some TSI work here in purple. I've added this food plot over here in green. Additionally, I've added another food plot over here. I also want to add in a watering hole near one of my tree stands. So I want to add a water source, go into the small category, choose the type, and then I'm going to add that right over here on this side of the property where there's not a lot of water access. And go ahead and then save that in the simulation. Now that I'm happy with those potential changes in the simulation, I can go and I can compare it to my baseline. And this is a really important feature of simulations. This is where you understand whether the changes that you're making are either making a positive or a negative impact. So if you click into compare to baseline, you'll have this side-by-side comparison. And on my left, you'll see this is my new simulation. And on the right, you have my baseline. And as you can see in the scoring in the top left here, my score is actually 274. I'm going to go ahead and recalculate that, see how that changes. So no change. This simulation is showing a score of 274, and my baseline already has a score of 277. So the changes that I've proposed to make on the property is not really doing me any good at all. In fact, it's lowered my score by about 3 points. And that's the whole purpose of simulations, right? Is that you may be thinking you're making a good change to the property, but after you go and actually look at the scoring and how things have changed, you may find out that it's a neutral or maybe even a slightly negative impact. So in this example, I would exit my comparison mode and I would go back to that simulation and I would start exploring again the possibilities of what I could change on my property to enhance that score. And then when I'm happy with those changes, I would click this Promote to Property Plan. And this is when I actually then intend to go and execute those specific things that are in that simulation in my property plan feature. So play around with simulations, give it a shot. Hopefully you can find the right combination of elements and food and water to improve the overall habitat and score of your property. The next feature we'll review is the property planning feature. And property plan is where you bring your ideas from your simulations and you bring them to life with the actual tasks and things that you intend to do across your property. So when you click into property plan, this is going to be a view of what specifically you've planned to do on your property based on the simulation that you've promoted to your property plan. As you can see in this property plan, I have roughly about 15 or so elements, and each one of those is an executable task. So if I start at the top, first one is adding a small water source near the edge of some cedars, and that's going to be a watering hole. If I go a couple layers down, I'm going to create a food plot, and it's going to be a winter standing corn plot, and I want to have that done by May 1st. So as you can see in my property plan, every one of these items you can set a to-do for and a specific date on when you'd like to have that accomplished. Additionally, you can choose a priority level by choosing the box on the right-hand side, and you have 3 different levels of priority that you can work through to set a priority for each one of these tasks. When you've completed a task, you simply go in and click on that specific item, and now you're telling the system, not only did I intend to do that, but I actually completed this. So I merge it to my baseline, and this updates your current baseline view so that the system now recognizes that you've went in and made that change on your property. So what I like the most about Property Plan is it creates a prioritized list. It also allows you to plan and set key dates to keep you on task and to ensure that you're getting the most time spent on your property that you can. And if you are overly ambitious, like I probably am with this plan, you can simply just delete an item by hitting the delete button and removing it from your property plan. So property planning is really where you bring ideas to life. Make sure you get out there in the field and get them done. And then when they're done, make sure you merge them to your baseline to tell the system that you've updated your property. The next feature we'll look at is the camera integration with Reveal. In this view, you can see I have a list of all of the cameras that are on this property. And what I like the most about this view is that it gives me a high level look into specifically the most important things about that camera. It gives me the name, gives me the model, it gives me whether it's an external or internal battery source. It gives me the signal strength, the storage, and the last time that it checked in. If you click into one of the cameras, you have some additional functionality here. You can choose whether or not you want to actually display that camera on the map by simply toggling that checkbox on and off. And it's going to pull in a gallery view of the specific pictures in chronological order that had been taken on that particular camera. So this functionality really pulls in your Tactacam reveals, gives you a more complete experience on your property, allows you to see the media associated with each one of the cameras, and allows you to click into that media to specifically see that picture if you'd like to, including the zoom functionality. Again, this is all integration with Tactacam Reveal, and it's important to make sure that every one of your Reveal cameras had associated GPS coordinates or are pinned to your Reveal map in order for that integration to pull through to Habitat IQ. So now that we went over all the key features and functionality with Habitat IQ, it's time for you to dig in and start exploring the app for yourself. So check out all the key features, play around with it, and enjoy it.